This episode of Angles is brought to you by Richmond Personal Injury Attorneys. Expect high-level communication, transparency, and cutting-edge technology to keep your case moving. Expect a legal team that's laser-focused and moves fast to get the results you deserve. When the unexpected happens, expect Richmond Vona. Learn more at richmondvona.com, 192 Seneca Street, Buffalo, New York. Welcome to Angles, the podcast where we dig into the stories behind impactful people and explore the sharp turns, daily decisions, and defining moments that shape how they got to where they are and how they keep moving forward. I'm John Richmond, and every week I sit down with guests who are building bold, meaningful lives and careers in Buffalo and beyond. If you enjoy these conversations, please hit follow, subscribe, drop a comment, or share the episode. It's a simple way to help us grow with the community and keep these stories coming. Today on Angles, I'm joined by Jonny Palmeri, aka Jonny the Barber, a guy who started cutting hair in his parents' garage at 15 and now runs 2 successful barbershops right here in Western New York. He's built his business on hard work, consistency, and detail. What sets him apart isn't just a fade, it's the mindset. We're talking about building from scratch, what it really takes to run a business, and why the barbershop is still one of the most honest places in town. Let's get into it. All right, Jonny Palmeri, aka Jonny the Barber. Welcome to the podcast, man. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good, man. Can't complain. I obviously really appreciate you being here. We've gotten to know each other quite a bit because you cut my hair. So if anybody doesn't like my haircut, you can blame this guy. But no, in all seriousness, got to know a good amount about you, but, I think this is a great opportunity to learn more about you and kind of see what makes you tick. And I figured we kind of just started off with, I'd love to hear you just kind of run through, kind of what led you to be wanting to become a barber, like how you learned that type of thing.
Yeah. So barbering for me started, kind of like on a whim without I kind of fell into it. So I was at my aunt's house and I was setting up her internet router. This was probably when I was 14 or 15, and I was with a buddy. We went there, we set up the router, and she used to cut my hair at her house. It was just a little salon set up in the room that the computer was in, and he's like, "Hey, can you edge up my neck?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." He's like, I usually just, do blah, blah, blah. So I did it, and I had this, for the first try, man, I had a sharp line on the back of the neck, so I was like, not bad. First time ever doing it. It went pretty well. So then that was probably, let's call it in June. Well, that December, my aunt bought me a clipper set for Christmas because I think I went to her house a couple more times and cut his hair. I don't know what I'm doing, but she bought me the clipper set. So then I just started cutting Buddy's hair for free. And then I started charging $5 a cut, and I started getting all these guys to come to my parents' garage. And I was like, okay. So then my parents had a heater. They had this a little gas heater. We were probably inhaling stuff and getting down. Now that I think about it, but we had the little gas heater. I set up a little TV, had a little waiting area with 2 chairs, and then we moved into this corner of the garage, and I started cutting hair there. And then I was working at I remember one time I was working at Starbucks. I was 17 or 18. I think I was 17. And I convinced one of these customers to come get a haircut. And I'm he comes to my parents' garage, and it was so weird. He had to use the bathroom, so I had to bring him in my mom's house. You know what, man? I got to get myself into a shop. This is getting weird. I could just feel it was weird. The haircut was great, but it was just a weird situation. So the guy ended up coming back a couple times, but that was after I moved to a shop. So, I moved to a shop after that experience, and then, the rest was history. I went from 1 chair to 2 to 4 to outgrowing that shop to opening up a place in Tonawanda to 2 years after that opening up downtown to 3 years after that opening up Williamsville. My lease downtown was up. I didn't want to renew it, so now we're in Williamsville and Tonawanda. There's 9 barbers, and here we are.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, I want to jump back. I'll say this, it's pretty cool to hear about you talking about, learning to cut, basically out of a garage. But I'm hearing that even when you were in a garage, you were taking it seriously. You were basically testing this out, right? You had the waiting area, you had the TV. I mean, yeah, exactly, right? You're already thinking about the client experience or the customer experience. That's amazing.
That's a good point, though, that's something I unintentionally did the whole time was, if someone's waiting, like, do I want the TV on? And then, like, what if there's, like, a pause in the TV? I should have music playing quietly in the background, too, so it's never, like, awkward. So it's, like, these are things that, like, you're right. I did by just putting myself in the customer's shoes without even trying to do that, but now I'm, like, very conscious of that.
Yeah.
Like, what are people seeing when they're here? Like, what does the whole area look like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, right? It's like you always want to deliver, regardless of what business you're in, deliver like the ultimate client or customer experience. But I'll say, because I maybe this resonates with you. Obviously, you're an extremely detail-oriented person. So think about going back, like when you're in the garage. So you're paying attention to all these details. How, at least in my opinion, sometimes being really detailed could also, it can almost kind of stop you from doing things because you feel like, wow, this isn't perfect yet. Like, how did you simultaneously, kind of fight the urge to like have to be perfect, and basically tell yourself, hey, I'm gonna start testing this out, build this experience, but also you're also learning, it sounds like, on the fly how to actually cut hair. So like, how were you able to do that all at once and kind of push through, knowing that you really are detail oriented?
So the cutting hair thing was always like one thing that I was like, I had a knack for. So like cutting hair, it's not like I ever had formal training, but like my training was, honestly, it was YouTube. It's not like it is now where like everyone's on like Instagram videos and teaching you. Like there was no Instagram, there was no like Facebook Reels or anything. It literally was just like YouTube videos. And I remember there was like two guys that were putting these videos up. So I would just watch the videos, consume the videos, and like emulate what they did. On top of, when I was 15, I started going to the east side of Buffalo and getting my hair cut. And being there, like, there was no appointments, there was nothing like that. So you would sit and wait for 3-4 hours for your haircut. Mm-hmm. So I'd be in there just watching everyone. So I consumed a lot by just watching, and then I would apply that, at the barbershop. Like, even little things like, I don't know, the way that those guys would comb and fade, like, I do that. So, like, I picked up on a lot of these, like, tendencies of, like, a barbershop on the east side that I've kind of like put into my work now. That's
amazing. And, going back to like when you're learning, I mean, it sounds like obviously you're just like a natural when it comes to this. Not that you didn't, of course, spend tons and tons and tons of time and energy, as you even do now, to constantly perfect your craft, because like you're never done. I got to imagine, though, there's some times where you made some mistakes on some of these guys rolling through in the beginning. And how would you kind of deal with that?
That's like the part of professionalism. That's like the hardest part. It's like making a mistake and knowing how to fix it. So I think that's like what you get good at. But at the time, you're like, yeah, man, I just messed up. Like, there's times where you just, you make the mistake. But as time goes on, you'll get good at fixing it. But like, I mean, I've definitely botched a couple things or had to learn on the fly, or like, made a mustache too thin or something like that. It'll just happen. But I think being transparent with someone and being like, yeah, man, I went a little thin on the old stash, is like, it says a lot, instead of being like, yeah, I didn't make a mistake.
Yeah. It's accountability, right? It's like owning up to it. I think that so many people, I mean, whether it's your line of work, my line of work, whatever, I mean, if we're not, or I should say we're all human, like we're going to make mistakes. And I think just being accountable for it and owning up to it or doing your best to fix it is what people usually care about the most.
And hopefully they give you a second chance to make it right. But
yeah.
In my industry, usually you got one shot. If you mess it up, it's a wrap.
That's a really good point. I'll be honest, I never really thought about that, and that kind of resonates with, my business. With, you have one case, there's one shot at it. You're absolutely right, because now I think about it, in the past, when I was younger and I went and I got a haircut from somebody, if they did a bad job, I probably am not going back.
Well, in your industry, like, if you don't win someone a case, like, they're out. It's like, out.
Yeah, it's not good. But either way, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were, so you're cutting hair in your garage, you're learning, you're spending time in these barbershops, watching other people. At what point did you realize, what, like, I could actually make a livelihood out of this? And
for sure.
Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so I was going to college, and because like at the time you had to go to college, right? So it was like, probably what's called 2011. I graduated high school in 2010, so it was 11 or 12. And, you had to go to school. So I'd be cutting people's hair like at my parents' house in the garage, and they're all like, what are you going to school for? So I went to school. I was going for business. I did N-Trip for a semester, and then Buff State for, my following semesters. And I was at Buff State, and I was doing school like full time on Tuesdays and Thursdays from like, let's call it 7 a.m. to, I want to say it was like 1:15 or 2. But the whole day I was at school, I'd be like booking appointments for when I was out of school because Tuesdays and Thursdays were my long days in the barbershop. So I would work from like 2 to 11 p.m. So it was like I was getting through my school day to rush to the barbershop to like cut hair, and I'd be cutting all these people's hair. And then it got to the point where I was like, what the heck am I doing at school? Like, I'm making good money now. I'm busy. My Instagram was like blowing up. All these people were like hitting me up, and then it was like, yeah, man, I'm just gonna try cutting hair. So I was like, I did the whole like I'll take a semester off thing, and then that just turned into like, the business blew up. It was like, constant people coming in, and that's when like I would say when I was like 18 or 19, that's when I really started getting busy. And I had a part-time job at the time. I worked at West Her, so like I was meeting people at West Her, and I was cutting all the employees there, and I was at West Her on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. That's why Tuesday, Thursdays were my really long days with school in the barbershop. And then it turned into like Wednesdays and Fridays after West Her. When I got out at 6, I was cutting till midnight. And then Saturdays, I got out at 3 and I was cutting from 3 to 11. It was like, it just got to the point where like organically, I would just cut time back on like whatever, I would cut time back on West Her. I would cut time back on school. And then it just got to the point where I was working barbershop fully.
Were you, I mean, it's funny. It's like, I think a lot of people, and understandably, right, they get, even if they all signs, kind of are leading towards the thought that like, hey, I could actually like start my own business and I could be successful doing it. I think there's still just a lot of understandable like fear and apprehension about doing it. Because you had never run a business yourself before, had you, prior to doing this? No. And
No,
I think I read back in an old article, I think your dad was a police officer, right?
Yep.
And I don't. Did your mom work, or did she own her own businesses?
She worked. I think she worked in like angiogram in the hospital.
Oh, awesome.
When me and my sister were born, she stopped working, and my dad just worked. But my dad ended up getting like a heart issue, and he had to retire when I was 2. So they had this like curveball thrown at him. So it's not like it's not like there was any business sense, or it's not like I come from money or anything. So it was like a truly organic, like figured out thing. Because like I remember when I was working at Starbucks, I got free, it was called Beanstock. Working there, you get like free stocks. And I asked my parents about it, and they're like, "You don't want to mess with the stocks." Like, yeah, that's how your dad's friend lost all his money. So it was like, looking back, I'm like, Mom, it was free. They were just gonna give me stock for working there, but they're like, "You don't want to mess with that." So it's like my parents are very like, I don't even know what you'd call them. They're just like normal, hardworking people, earn a paycheck, like
That's awesome.
A little bit of I don't even know about investments. Like they're just like normal people. So it was like growing the barbershop, it grew because it had to at the time, not because like I even, I'm not like some business savant. I've gotten good at some things as I've gotten older, but I never had a business course or even college really. I'm in school and I'm booking haircut appointments all day. I wasn't even paying attention to, human biology. I was just like getting through the day so I could go cut hair.
But look, I gave you a lot of credit. I mean, you obviously follow your passion, and so I think oftentimes that passion can, in a good way, blind people to say like, hey, okay, I don't know all the ins and outs of accounting or like how to do all this stuff with the business, how to market it, but I believe in what I'm doing. I love it. And, you're starting to test things out and get this response, and you just run with it. I think kind of it can be a good thing, because a lot of us, or a lot of people just kind of get that analysis paralysis or get really scared about doing it because, yeah, it is a big risk. But, if you're passionate about it and you believe in yourself, I mean, I think, that's the way to go.
I cut a lot of people's hair that, they've done the whole like business school and gotten their MBA and all this stuff, and they're still just like, waiting to find that right job. So it's like,
it
what's better, what's worse? I don't know. I'm the kind of guy I like to learn like on the fly, and I like to learn like, kind of hands on. You could teach me in a book a million things, but until I'm like doing it, that's when I'm really gonna like pick up on something and learn something. That's how I've kind of always been.
Sure. So talk to me a little bit about kind of your journey now to where you are having the 2 shops. Like, obviously I can imagine it must have been very difficult at times. It's probably still difficult at times, but even though you're in a groove, kind of how did you get to where you are today with the 2 shops? And what do you think are some of like the biggest things you learned along the way?
So the 2 shops, we went from I was in Williamsville. I built up a pretty big business there. I had 3 guys working for me. Then we went to Tonawanda. I was able to buy that building when I was 22. So it was like, that was another thing that I just kind of had to figure out, like how to get a mortgage and all that stuff. And, my parents co-signed and like all this crazy stuff, but it all worked out great. So I got that. And then I was forced into being a landlord because that shop in Tonawanda had an apartment above it. So I'm like 22, 23. I got some like 40-year-old guy living up there. I'm like, hey man, you gotta pay your rent. But, you know, fell into that one and then, built that shop from, it was a 4-chair shop when we first got it. And then we knocked out a wall and made it a 5-chair shop. And then at that point, we had a ton of growth. So then we opened up downtown, and that was great. Built out like a really nice barbershop in the lobby of the old BAC building. And then we moved. Well, then we were there for, God, it's hard to remember. I think 3 or 4 years, and then by like year 3, I was like, it was like right during COVID. That's what it was. It was during COVID, and I was like, I don't really know if I want to still be downtown. The whole like vibe downtown switched. It went from being like super like, oh my God, this place is up and coming, and like, all these developers were doing this and doing that, and the Statler was getting renovated, and they were going to build these crazy apartments on the waterfront, to just like nothing during COVID. So then I was like, I got to kind of switch up and figure something out a little bit different. So then that's when we moved, or that's when the Williamsville property just like kind of we fell into that one. That was literally out of nowhere. My fiduciary told me that he had clients reach out to him and say that they were going to sell their building and their business in Williamsville. This was all during COVID. And that one was, I still can't believe how that one just opened up, because we were downtown, we were in Tonawanda, and then this Williamsville shop opened, and then that's when I was like, okay, we're going to not renew the lease downtown, because it was a 5-year lease with a 5-year option. But I didn't want to renew the 5 years because, we bought something in Williamsville and I own Tonawanda, so it was like, if I don't have to rent, I'm not going to. Right. So then we moved the barbers from downtown to Williamsville. Most of the clients followed, and, the rest is kind of history with like having the 2 shops now. We have 2 shops, pretty much fully staffed. I have 1 open chair in Tonawanda, and we're all cranking. Everyone's happy.
How do you, so especially as a business owner, like, how do you split time between the 2 shops? Because I know that every time I come see you, you're at the Williamsville shop. Talk to me about, kind of letting go and letting other people you trust run the other shop, or you're not there. Kind of talk to me about that.
Yeah, so Dorian, been my best friend for forever, but I was the best man at his wedding. He was the best man at my wedding. He runs the Tonawanda shop, and he's got a great crew of guys with him that all look up to him. And Dorian's a great person to aspire to cut like and be like, because he just has such a great personality. So Dorian runs the Tonawanda shop, and like having him there helps it. So like, I still go there weekly and check in and supplies and this and that, but like having him like kind of man the operation puts my mind at ease and lets me like be able to like focus on the Williamsville shop and like, the crew of guys we have there. And like, I think having good guys work with you helps to be able to like decide if you want to like do more in the future. I would like to open up another shop, but at this point I don't want to like open up another shop and then just take on a bunch more work. I would want, to build up kind of like the next crew of guys, because, I'm getting to the point where like I'm super busy, thank God, and booked up. So it's like, I don't want to take time away from, my clients right now to, spend 20 extra hours, and I have a family now, and be away from them to open up a new shop.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's, first off, it's so true. Like, working with great people is so important. I mean, because especially if you're trying to grow or scale a business, I mean, if you don't have great people, and like the Dorian or everyone has that person, hopefully, if their business is growing, that they can rely on, it's impossible. And I think I read someplace, and it might have been like an old article, and it definitely makes sense to me now, obviously having had the experiences in your shop. But I read something about how you really want to focus on hiring the right people, like a good fit for your shop, and that you can help them become better barbers, help train them. Can you just kind of talk about that?
100%. Yeah, I've always said that. It's you almost don't want the like 20-year tenured barber, because like usually the ego's through the roof, and on top of that, like you can't kind of break people of like we all have bad habits. Like I learned in my garage on YouTube, I definitely have bad habits. It's like hard to like, train an old dog new tricks. It really is. But if I can take someone that's new into barbering, or very like, if you're the type that you want to learn, like that's the guy I want, because it's like we all have different things of doing it, different ways of doing things. And I'm not saying that, my way or the barber or the Jonny the Barber way is like the way to do it, but it's been kind of tried and true that, we know what we're talking about in certain things. But I've had people work for me that, you know, you can't tell them anything, and like they just don't last, because like you have to be able to like want to grow and like want to learn things. And even if it's not barbering per se, it's like how you talk to your customers, how you act when there's a mom and little kids in the waiting area. Like if you can't dial yourself back or change up your language when there's different people in the shop, like those are things that like you have to be able to do. You can't just be like, well, this is where I work, this is how I am. That doesn't work.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about that. And something else, again, I've noticed this being in your shop. So it seems like all the guys get along really well. You can tell, and you have guys at different stages. You can kind of tell where they're at, but everyone, is good at what they do. They're learning. And all you guys, obviously in my experience with you, has taught me that you are in a very good way a maniac about attention to detail, which is so important. And whether it's the way your shop is set up, how clean it is, how you're cutting hair. Can you just talk about, again, I know we were talking about it earlier, but your attention to detail and kind of how that plays into your customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, my attention to detail is, I think it shows through in my work and like the barbershop, because like attention to detail is, it's like literally, it's our
Yeah, it's everything what you do.
So it's like, if you're not going to be the guy to pick up something on the ground, or when you're walking into the barber shop, like pick up, I don't know, if like the salt thing is, blown because of the wind. If you're not going to be that guy to pick that up, or if you're not going to wipe any dribbles off the seat, if you're not going to be that kind of mind, then like, how are you going to be good at barbering? So like, I've told barbers that you have to train your detail muscle. So it's like, it's not that like, you're just not going to do it, but like you have to be conscious of like wanting to be detailed in every aspect of your life. So it's like, your medicine cabinet at home, like you should put things back exactly where they go, because that helps you when cutting hair, put like your guards back in the right tray. So like when you're cutting hair quickly, you want to grab your your two guards in the 2 guard slot, and not just sitting on your station. Like you want to be very like regimented. That way your product is good. So I think if you're cleaning your state, like we clean our stations every week. We keep everything super clean. The capes, our smocks, like everything looks right. So if you're doing that, I think that all plays into like being a better barber and like actually like really doing a good job with it.
For sure. I think, everything you're saying resonates with me too. I mean, I know some people don't like having, a routine. They don't like, being regimented like that. I always encourage people to at least try it, build those habits, because it actually it gives you this like greater sense of having control. Like, hey, if something crazy happens or something unexpected happens, at least I got this stuff set up. Like I know where everything is. I'm in a routine, and I think it helps a lot. Something else. Sorry, go ahead.
With like working out, like, we've talked about it, and you're super dedicated to exercising and working out every day. That shows true to like everything you're doing, like in your business and in your life, because you've made that a point to like, you don't compromise that. Like whether you're, you've told me some days you don't feel like it, you'll just go like run on the treadmill for 15 minutes and then like figure out if you want to stay there.
Yeah.
So it's like, you doing that is why your business is successful. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it all plays into like who you are.
Yeah, I agree. It helps. I mean, we definitely have that in common. It's like, and yeah, we've talked about that a lot. It's like, just having some consistency every day, especially when you run a business and so much, I mean, you never approach any day and it's the same. It's never exactly how you thought it was going to go. So at least if you have that couple hours in the morning or whenever it works for you in your routine, like of that downtime or that consistency that kind of sets you up for the day, I think it's super important. And I always like encourage my friends or family members, like, hey, just give it a shot. You don't have to be a crazy person about it.
The only way to become a morning person is to like force yourself to get up. Like no one just like You can't just start tomorrow and be like, all right, I'm a morning person. Like, it sucks, but
You know, I was reading a quote. It was Alex Hormozy, and his quote was, "You want to become a morning person? Get up one day at 5 a.m., work all day, and then you're going to fall asleep at like 8 o'clock, and then you'll wake up the next day at 5 a.m., and suddenly you're a morning person." There you go.
that's literally the facts, though.
Yeah, right?
Done it. Like, you'll get to like 6 p.m. and you're like, wow, I could fall asleep.
Yeah, totally. We'll be right back after a word from our partners.
After an accident, life can be scary, stressful, tricky. You need Richmond Bona to help navigate the process, because getting a life-changing settlement can not only take time, it can take an emotional toll. The team at Richmond Bona provides high levels of support through all the ins and outs, so you get the settlement you need and the new beginning you deserve.
When the unexpected happens.
Expect Richmond Bona.
Now back to the conversation. So let me ask you this, something I'll be honest, I did not pick up on this right away, and then I picked up on it, and I've never asked you about it because I wanted to wait till now. Unlike any other salon or barbershop I've ever been in, your chairs do not face the mirror. Everybody who's getting their haircut faces each other. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, it's definitely something I've been very conscious of doing. I wanted to, promote conversation in a space like that. That's actually why I did Williamsville the way I did it, because Tonawanda, we had all the chairs in a row. And it's cool, but like, you're like facing someone for a second and then you're turning out, and then you're facing someone for a second and then you're turning out. So it's like, I wanted to promote like cross-shop communication where barbers and clients are all talking, and the barbershop is like the one place you can still talk religion and politics, and like, you're just laying it all out there because it is what it is. So we do these cross-shop conversations all the time where, my guy is talking with Mark's guy, and, Mark and Ernie. It's like everyone's just talking and conversating, and it's like, I think number one, it helps the day kind of go by, but number two, it just helps, like, I think everyone kind of feels like at home. Like, most people that come in are like, yeah, this is my spot. Like, even if it's like your first try, I think it just promotes a good vibe where, I've seen shops that just face you toward the mirror, and it's very like barber client, and that's nice, and intimate settings are great, and sometimes I do that where like I'll just talk with my client one-on-one, especially if they're going through something, we'll talk quietly, and I could face them toward the mirror and cut behind them. So that's fine too, but I think the way that we've built the business and built the brand was by full shop communication, and just because it's set up like that doesn't mean that we do it all the time, but it just invites more conversation when you're, chit-chatting from, 10 feet away.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's awesome. And it's a testament to like your focus on your client experience there, which is, I think it's huge. I mean, at least I can tell you, going into your shop, especially I remember the first time, like you guys were all super welcoming. Everyone, again, you're right. Like everyone feels comfortable, like kind of, you can just have conversations. You don't have to worry about too much. And you guys are quick too. And something I was thinking about, again, like I was preparing to talk to you, and I'm like, I never really thought about this. I got to imagine that standing there all day and cutting over and over and over again has got to be exhausting. I mean, you're on your feet all day, you're using your hands. Can you just talk about kind of the toll it takes on you? And
yeah, that's definitely kind of why I've like, in the last couple of years, like really focused on, fitness and working out and doing things to kind of like, you got to think about it. You're cutting someone's hair all day. We're rolled in all day. So now like when I work out, I'm doing things to like open up my posture. So, instead of being like, concave over, I'm like trying to, correct and straighten myself out. We see like these old barbers, and like, even Dorian last week showed me this like video of a dude, and he goes, bro, this is going to be us. The guy was like walking in a parking lot. Dorian recorded it, and he was like just bent over, like walking it up. Dorian's like, bro, this is going to be us. So it's like, we're consciously doing things to try and, alleviate that tension. Cause like, we stand on mats, but your feet will hurt. God, I'm trying to think, like, at the end of the day, I never really get, like, hand stuff or anything like that, but it's just, your ankles will be sore, your calves, it's just, like, a constant, like, I mean, you're standing for 8 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And we're always, like, shifted onto one hip, so that's another thing I'm always conscious of, is trying to, like, switch it up or stagger my stance so I'm not just like on one hip all day long. Because then, like, 10 years of that, I'm sure my hips will be shot.
No, yeah. I just, again, it's like something, I know we talk a lot about health and wellness too, and it makes a lot of sense why you're into it. I think it's important. I think it's important for everybody. And I also noticed too, when I'm in there, you're kind of like the big brother in there. I mean, you're the leader, of the shop. Can you just talk about kind of like maybe some lessons you've learned about running and building and leading a team? Because it's not easy, and it's something I feel like you have to constantly learn about. Like, can you just sort of talk about that?
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit I've had is that, I'm side by side with these guys every day. So it's like, kind of leading by example is like, the way I unintentionally have done it. Because it's like, I'm not going to tell you to go in early and then, I'm going to show up at 11 a.m. Like, I want to be the first one there, and now I can see it in the younger generation. These guys are really, they're starting to work. They're coming in early, they're staying late, they're making that time. But like, I know that you have to do that for a block of years in order to get to the point where you can tell clients then when to come in. So it's like, you're not going to put that time in and be available and like get people in no matter what, then how are you going to, you're never going to get to the point where you can decide to leave at 4 every day and your guys will like get in when they can. So like, if you're not available in the beginning and kind of get your people to like buy into what you're doing and the times and stuff, then how are you going to get these people, when you want to leave at 5 to go to your kid's t-ball game, or, as life progresses, like, they're not going to come in on their lunch. They're like, well, I like to come in after 5. So it's like, I can give these guys the best advice for barbering because I've made all the mistakes and I've done, a lot of things. But the one thing I don't compromise is my work and when I show up and when I leave. I'm very punctual. I'm always on time. And I think those are things that, like, as we get older and my clientele is aging with me, like, those are the things people care about more than, like, I don't know, the most perfect photoshopped fade. They rather know that they're in the chair at 12, they're out at 12:28, so then they could get to their lunch meeting at 12:45.
That's a great point. Again, something I have not thought about, but you guys are always dead on time.
Yeah.
Like, you really are. Like, wow, that's interesting. I have not thought about that. How do you ensure that? How is everybody ensuring that? Is it just...
So I used to be like a stickler for time. Like, I used to be like, if someone was like 10 minutes late, I'm not cutting you, man. When you're 22 and like your ego is what it is, like that kind of thing. Like, that's when things like that, I think can hinder you. So now it's like, as I've gotten older, if someone's 10 minutes late, I'm going to give you 20 minutes of what I can do, but I'm not going to eat into the next guy's time who is, on time or 5 minutes early. Like, I'm not going to eat into his slot because, whatever happened. I'm not a jerk about it, but it is what it is. Like, I can move pretty quick. I can get a lot done. If someone gives me 10 minutes, if they're 20 minutes late, I can make something happen with those 10 minutes. So instead of being a stickler on like, you need to be here, I need 30 minutes, I don't want to compromise what I'm doing, I think clients have understood that, you're gonna get that 30 minutes if you're on time. If not, I'll make whatever happen. And most people who even, let's say there was a fender bender on Main Street and you were 8 minutes late, I can pretty much make anything happen. So I think the guys have just saw that. But I mean, I have guys that are, just routinely behind because they're still super focused on the product, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think a client will appreciate like the barber that's 8 minutes behind because everything's perfect. But I think it's as you get older, you're like, bro, I don't really care about this. Like, I gotta,
Right.
I gotta get out of here. I gotta get back to work. I only get 30 minutes for lunch. Like, there's different reasons as you age.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, one thing that I give you a ton of credit about is how you've built your brand. I mean, before I even met you, before I started getting my hair cut by you, I knew about your brand. I feel like everybody knows about it. And, it can be so easy, and I know this from, kind of mistakes that we've made advertising and stuff like that in our business, but can be so easy to just be like, okay, I'm just going to go buy a ton of TV ads. I'm just going to go buy, a bunch of radio, whatever it is. I feel like you've done an amazing job of building your brand through social media and kind of like that one client at a time mentality, just continuing to build it. Can you talk about your attention to brand building and kind of what you think has, kind of helped you get to where you are today in terms of the brand awareness that you have now?
Yeah, I think growing the brand was like, for the most part, like strictly organic, but I was building a barbershop brand at a time when like everybody wasn't. So it was like a lot easier for me because, barbering wasn't like what it was, God, in like 2012. And, what it is today, it was not that then. I had the advantage of being like one of the few guys in Williamsville that could do a fade or something like that. So, I was blasting fades out on Main Street at 18, and like people were hearing about me and like booking with me, and it was like a constant like, kind of like revolving door of new clients hearing about me. And then, I started my Instagram at a time when not many people had Instagram, and then I started posting barbering pics, and like, the organic growth was insane. It just like exploded. And then like as you take barbers on, those barbers start building up their clienteles and their reach, and then we all just work together at building this great brand that we never meant to really grow. I mean, I never even wanted it to be called Jonny the Barber. It just kind of happened. Like, I would have named it a different name, like whatever, X Barbershop. But everyone was like, oh, go to Jonny the Barber, go to the Jonny the Barber. And then I was like, well, damn, I guess we got to call it Jonny the Barber. And there was a while, like, I hated it, right? I hated that it was my name in the thing, but now it's like, it is what it is. And like, people know it. It's a big brand. And as a barber, like, people know Jonny the Barber and clients know Jonny the Barber. And it's just built up to become something that, I never thought it was going to be.
I mean, it takes a long time, right? I mean, like, there's that saying, right? Overnight success takes a hell of a long time, right? I mean, you've been doing this for a long time now. And since you were 15 years old, slowly building the brand, even before you had your own shop. And, it's like kind of back to when we were talking about developing younger people in your organization, at your shop, whatever it is in your business. There's no instant gratification. Like, it takes a long time. And then it's like out of the blue, you start seeing it gain some momentum. But I think, like you're insinuating, obviously there's a lot of other barbershops that have opened up now. And it's like once you kind of start that climb, you can never stop, because the second you stop, you start sliding down. There's really no recovery. How do you, kind of keep moving forward, kind of keep yourself motivated to try to be better every day, especially now with all the new competition?
Yeah, I think it's like one of those, like, if you're not growing, you're shrinking kind of things. And
Yeah.
like, all the barbershops in the world can open, and it's like, I want to say, like, we were cutting hair before it was like cool to cut hair. So it's like, me and Dave and like Dorian and, all the OGs, like, we were cutting hair when like I'd be cutting someone's hair and they'd be asking like what I'm in school for. And I'm like, well, you really want to get a degree? And now it's like, I hear the conversations in the shop, how they've changed, where like, you have grown men coming in like, oh man, the trades are amazing. You want to be in the trades. And it's just like, to hear that switch is like funny, because it was all about college at one time. And now it's like all about the trades and how tradesmen can do so well and this and that. So it's just, I think barbering as a whole has become like an actual like career as opposed to like a hustle. So I've just watched it completely change, where like, someone hears you're a barber and they're like, oh man, that guy makes money. When it never was like that. It literally was like, yeah, you got to still get a degree. What are you going for? Business, finance? Like, good. You got to stick with that.
I think it's so awesome that, it's acceptable in this day and age for people to follow their dreams and do what they really want to do, and find ways to make money that make them happy. It's like sometimes I get like young law school students, or actually people before they're in law school, saying, oh, should I go to law school? And I'm like, look, like, if you know for certain that you're really passionate about it, even if you don't know exactly what you want to practice, but you're really passionate, yeah, you should do it. But if you don't have that passion yet, I suggest, exploring some other options, or figuring out whether or not you do have it. And it's just awesome that, you can kind of, I guess, like, create your own path now. Like my dad he went to college, but he was a masonry contractor. He still owns his own masonry business. And, I'm sure he uses some of the stuff he learned about business in college, in his actual business. But for the most part, it's like you're learning on the fly, and it's something
you learn on the fly.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
And it's like, yeah, no, I've gotten good at accounting because I had to. I've gotten good at marketing because like I had to. And then like especially with the growth, we've had 10 barbers at one point, and it's like, yeah, like we got to learn how to market because like it's 5 out of 10 are busy, but like you want to get the other 5 busy, so it's like, okay, it's time to market. So like you just adapt as you're in it. And I think any business, as long as you have that like learning mentality, always growing mentality, like you're gonna be fine. I think it's the people that go into it like this is gonna work no matter what. Those are the ones that I think struggle because like there are times that it just doesn't work. There are times where like personalities don't mesh, and someone does this to a customer, you get a negative review, and like not everything is going to work like you have it written out in a business plan. So it's like you got to be able to act on the fly and like make the right decisions, and the only way to do that is by being in it fully.
100%. I mean, there's that saying again, like grow or die. But while you're growing, as I can attest, and I'm sure you can too, you make mistakes or that you have failures that almost make you feel like you're going to die.
Yeah.
Are there any like failures or mistakes that you think about that maybe you feel actually helped you and helped you get better?
Yeah, for sure. So like barbershops are all about personalities and this and that, and I had Tonawanda that was fully staffed, and we had downtown, and downtown was like a 5-chair shop. And it was in a tougher location because we didn't have a parking lot, and it was the first time we've had to adapt to like not having the amenities that we're used to. So like we had street parking and a parking ramp, and people had to pay for parking and this and that. So we had barbers working down there, and then I had a barber who wanted to go off on his own. So there was a time downtown where I was cutting alone for my days down there, and it was like, okay, so it's like you either can fail and cower and back into a corner, or you could just dig your heels in and make it happen. And at the time I remember driving to work like, okay, I got to make this work. And boy, has that shaped like my mentality of I've never grown too big where like I'm screwed, but like when you have a fallout and you have people leave, whatever that reason may be, good or bad reasons, it's still the individual or the business owner that's got to like pick up the pieces and make it work. So I just rallied, dug my heels in, hired new barbers, trained them up, and we made it. We did great. And then downtown for let's call it a 4-month, I don't even remember what it was now, but 2 to 4 months of like, what the heck, I got to figure it out. I mean, it exponentially grew to a point where we were at full capacity, busy every day. Like the barbers were killing it, to the point where we can open up in a completely different part of town, move all those clients, move those barbers, and those barbers have only leveled up, and they're only doing like, this is the best they've ever done is right now. And like it would have just never, you know what I mean? Like none of that would have happened. I wouldn't have met these guys had that not have happened. And a lot of these setbacks they're for, there's a purpose, and they're for a good thing. They're for a good reason.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as tough it is, you learn a lot more from the failures because you're right. Like, I think sometimes from the outside, people think, oh, this business is growing, it's doing great. It's like, look, it might be doing well, but there's a lot of tough times. It's just how it is. You have to learn a lot. So I always tell, especially people in their 20s, I'm like, hey, if you are in your 20s and if you are, and maybe you don't have a family, you don't have kids, that kind of thing, and it's just kind of you're worried about. I mean, that's a time really to take risks. Not to say that you can't do it later on, but I think, people amaze themselves like when you have to rely on yourself to do something. Like it's amazing what you can do, right? And but I get it. It's scary, like to put yourself in a corner and say, okay, I got to scratch and kind of claw my way out. But it's amazing what people can do. I mean, that's
also changed like kind of like why I've made the shop what it is too, because I want to make it so like a barber doesn't have to leave and have to open up their own place to feel like they're going to get ahead. I want my barbers to make money. I want them to be super successful. I want them to, have the cars they want and the house they want by like working in my shop. So it's like I've learned how, everyone can make money and everyone can remain happy. Like all my barbers have, awesome cars and nice houses and go on vacations and do all these things, which is like, for me, that feels good that, my people are living. It's not like, I'm the only one making money and this and that. Like everyone in the shop is doing incredible. So it's like, I think that's a direct reflection on like the business that we've all built together because, we all live good lives because of, this trade that we call barbering.
Yeah. Well, it's also because you recognize that, you wouldn't be able to build this the way you have without these people. And I think
100%.
that's
And
a huge
each and
testament
every
to
one
it.
of them. The people that, have gone off on their own, the people that, have just left and stopped barbering, all of them, the guys that are there now, like we all built this together. And I'm the first one to give them credit. Like this is not all me. All of me was when I was in my garage cutting at my parents' house. That was like kind of like, almost a dead end. Now it's huge.
I appreciate that. It resonates with me. I think that's important. You're nothing without your people. And obviously we're nothing, as business owners without our clients. And I got to imagine you get to have some really interesting and just probably cool conversations. You cut for so many people. I mean, you've cut, for celebrities and, professional athletes and just, successful people or just, a lot of interesting people in general. What do you think are, like, talk to me about that approach, like, or that ability to be able to talk to all these different people. And are there any like kind of big lessons you've learned from people?
Yeah, I've learned that I can have like the most incredible conversation when I talk to the back of someone's head. So it's for some reason, like when you're face to face, it's just different. And like, obviously I've gotten better at it, but like put me behind someone's head and cutting their hair and wool, that is like the most in-depth, like organic conversation ever that just flows. So I've just learned, I make the experience about the customer like totally. Like, we just had, a new baby 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago now, and a ton of my clients didn't even know it. I mean, we didn't put it on like Facebook or Instagram, but like all my clients are like, dude, what the hell? You never told me. And I'm like, I tell my wife, like, I'm just good at my job. I just make it all about them and get my client talking, like to the point where they're not like, hey man, like what's going on in your life? Like I don't even want, like I want this half hour to be about them. Like it's not only a haircut, it's therapy. Like the amount of clients that call me on my days off to tell me about, things we've talked about in the shop and what they got going on is like, it's crazy because, I've built it where like I want to be that, I don't know if the word's vice, but just like that, like place where people can like, dude, we talk about a lot of stuff. I mean, I know a lot about a lot of stuff. I know, the guy who's having trouble at home to, this guy's leaving this job to, my kids are doing this and that. Like, we talk, it's not just surface level conversations. Like I talk to my clients about literally however deep they want to go, we'll talk. And I like to be that ear that's always open and, I'm not super opinionated on stuff. So I feel like I can give a pretty level, there's pretty like level correspondence. It's not just like one-sided. I want to hear what they say, and then, if they want my opinion, I'll give it. Sometimes people just want to talk. Sometimes I just shut the hell up and just let them go.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't talk at all.
Yeah, no, that you fill it out each time, right? You kind of let it go. That's interesting. Again, something I never thought about. I wonder if part of the reason they're opening up so much is because they're not looking at you eye to eye. I don't know. I'm not taking away from you. I mean, you're a trustworthy guy and you're very easy to talk to. You're not judgmental. But I never thought about that before. That's interesting because you're not looking them face to face and they're just talking to you. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my wife, I'll get home from work and, I've had, X amount of conversations in the day and she'll be like, why are you talking? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know. But now it's like, now I know. It's like I've had it's draining as like a person doing these services to, all day people put this stuff on you. And sometimes like I've heard some heavy stuff, man. I've talked to people out of some dark spots in their life. And it's like, when you're having those conversations, you're like, damn, like, I don't know. Like, there's been times where I'm like, I don't know what advice to give you, but, I'm an ear to listen right now. Let me think about this.
Sometimes that's all it takes is just somebody to listen. They don't necessarily need the advice. So that makes a lot of sense. I know you're a proud husband and father. I know you, like you said, I know you have 2 kids. What do you think, like, running the business has taught you about maybe being a better husband or a better dad?
Oh my God, it's taught me to be present for sure. So it's like, it's easy to, you're at work all day working, and then you get home and it's like, okay, I got to catch up on emails and texts and phone calls, and I didn't answer this call because I was in a good conversation. So, by the time I get home, there'd be 8 missed phone calls and 15, 20 text messages, and I got to move this client and this and that. So, it's taught me that when I get home, I got to put my phone down. I have like a timer now on Instagram and Facebook where I give myself 15 minutes a day. Like, that's it. And usually I'll chew that up at work. So by the time I get home, I'm not on social media. So it's just taught me to be present with my kids because, you get such a short window in life where your kids are little and looking up to you and watching every move you make. And it's like, I don't want to squander that. And I don't want to, take that for granted that, when I get home, all my son wants to do is play cops and robbers and put me in jail in the bathroom and go to the basement and play. It's like I would rather eat dinner and do all that stuff after he goes to bed than, when I get home. So it's like it's taught me that, I could be exhausted. I could have that oh my God, it's 6 p.m. I'm ready to fall asleep. But I got to turn it on as soon as I pull in the driveway because, my little guy's going to only be that little and want dad, to hang out and go play. All he wants to do is hang out with dad when he gets home. So it's like I gotta perform. I gotta be there for him.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. I mean, whether you have kids or not, I mean, being present with your friends or your loved ones when you're outside of work, whether you own the business or you're working for somebody else, it doesn't matter. I mean, that can be very difficult, especially if you got a lot going on at work. But that is actually very, very good advice. Something that I was not good at in the past that I've really been working on. I'm actually really glad
that's
you brought
probably
that
why
up.
relationships haven't worked out in the past.
It's hard.
When I was building up the business, it was like I never had good relationships because I couldn't. It was like, my first priority was the shop. So it's like, I can't blame these people in my life for not wanting to be in my life when, I was giving them 5% of me. My wife now has taught me so much about being present and not doing the whole you're on your phone scrolling and you're talking yeah putting it down and looking at them and I think every business owner at one point of their life is guilty of being too deep into the business, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but when you have kids and you're married, there's other priorities that are gonna last probably longer than the business.
Yep, 100%. So you've got to this level of success. I mean, you got 2 shops. I mean, there's no question that, if you want more, you can have it. What do you think is your plan going forward? Where do you see Jonny the Barber in, maybe 5 years from now?
5 years from now. So I would I really take pride in my guys being successful people in their lives. So I want my guys to keep growing. I want them to keep getting busier. I want them to keep making money. I want to see them have families. And, when we have our Christmas party, I want to, 5 years from now, have all my guys because they're all younger now, but I want to see everyone with little kids and all these things. And I want it to grow into this big thing that, we all built together. So I would really like to just watch my guys keep getting busy, keep, building their lives and being able to, fund their lives at Jonny the Barber. Not anyone can go open up a barbershop now. Do I think it's going to be anything impressive? Probably not anymore because, everyone's opening up shops and things like that. So I want my guys to build up their life at the shop and, would I open up another one? For sure. Do I know where? No, but I'm not opposed to opening up another shop. I would just want to open it a little differently where it's not just me doing everything and making all the decisions. It'd be nice to maybe take on a shop that was already existing and make it a Jonny the Barber and retrain those guys or have a partner on opening it so it's not just my time because my time is very valuable now that I have a family and I don't want to jeopardize these short years. I have a 3.5-year-old and I have a 6-week-old and my son turned 3.5 in the blink of an eye. Yeah. So even if I had to, let the business stay organic for a little bit longer, my first priority is raising my kids and being there for them and being a good husband. And the barbershop is always been that stable piece in my life, and I, obviously wanted to always be that, but, I'm a dad now, so it's
Yeah.
like, that's the coolest thing ever.
I hear you talk a lot about, what you want to do for your family, for the people that trust you, that work with you. I also know that you and your wife do a lot for the community, for charity. Can you talk about how you got into that? How you, or why it is that so important for you, and maybe if there's any ones in particular that you're focused on. I'd just love to hear more about that because I think
Yeah,
it's really important.
yeah. So charity is obviously important because when you hit a certain level of success, it's like it's not like about you. You know what I mean? So it's like, a lot of business owners are very self-centered in this and that, and then it's like, you get to a point where it's like it can't just be the me show all the time. So, we've worked with charities in the past, and we've cut the homeless, and we've done a lot of things in the past, but I've never had anything where like, that's ours and like we can directly like impact people that need it. So 2 years ago, or my wife, God, I think it was like a year ago, her and Dave, who cuts next to me, so Tiff and Dave's wife, KL, they started Women for Western New York, which was, it's a, I think, I don't even know what it would be called, 501c3, like
Yep. Yep.
nonprofit or whatever it is. So they
Yep.
started that, and, we throw one big event in the summer called the Ivory Affair, and then like we're gonna do small events here and there. But that one night, that one party for our first year, we raised 35,000 that we were able to donate to Shine Gold. I can't think of what the first thing is called, but it was like Shine Gold, which is a pediatric cancer foundation where they'll take care of patients. They will take them on trips, like kind of like the Make-A-Wish thing. There's a guy who does like boating things, so it's like a beautiful cause. And like we went to the event and it was amazing, and it was great to see that like in one night we could raise all that money, like using my clients and Dave's wife's clients, like at the restaurant, and our salon, Three Palms, like using those clients, and everyone coming to this event. The money that we were able to raise by throwing like an awesome party. So like this year, we have Ivory Affair, #2, and we expect it to be even bigger. We have great sponsorships already, and I just see it being a thing where like, it's like an all white party or all ivory party that gives everyone an excuse to just get dressed up and have like a amazing time for like an amazing cause.
That's awesome. If people want to learn more about that, where do they find out about
I would
that?
say theivoryaffair.com. Or you can go to like Three Palms or Canal Club, which is Dave's wife's restaurant, or Jonny the Barber. There's going to be links for the Ivory Affair where people can go buy tickets or become a sponsor. But that event is literally like, it was incredible. It was, we had table games that was all for charity, silent auction. We had 2 different bar areas. We had the back patio. We had a cigar roller back there. I mean, it really was like an incredible event that the girls threw. And like, I can't take the credit for any of that. That's literally all them. The only thing I'll take credit for is a lot of my clients, went and sponsored and things like that. But that's about it. They like spent countless hours. Our front desk girl, Charlotte, she spends countless hours. KL's 2 of her employees, Molly and KK, they're, one's an accountant and she handles all that. The other one is handling like all the details. So it's like, it's a great meld of like, the women of Western New York, like having a charity that actually like makes the community better.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. It's so important to give back, and it's great that you guys found a cause and you have everybody working together to do that every year. It's pretty amazing. So look, we've talked about a lot today. I've learned a lot about you even before we get on here. What's one thing that you think people may not know about you that you wish that they did?
That's a good question. I think if people knew like, how into, health and wellness I was, it would open up. I think I would, let me rephrase that. I think if people knew how into health and wellness I was, like we could have like really great conversations in the chair where like, I'm not saying I know everything, but like I know that a few nutrient deficiencies can like really enhance like the winter blues or stuff like that. So if like people like were more open with like, yeah man, I take this and this, I take this vitamin, like, I'm pretty well read on that stuff, and I listen to an embarrassing amount of medical podcasts. I feel like we could really have like good conversations about like, things people could add or not add, or things that have worked for me. Because, I'm obviously not a trained medical professional, but, I've done a lot of independent research, and I feel like, that would open the door to like good conversations of people like, being healthier. And, I think having kids forced me to do that, because it's like, I want to be around for my kids. I want to be here. I want to, have a long, healthy life. And I want my health span, which is how long you feel good, to match, my lifespan, or get pretty damn close. A lot of people start dying at 60 and they live to 85. I want that spread to be like a day.
Yeah, I think those health and wellness conversations are so important too, because there's so much information out there now. It can be really difficult to figure out, like,
talk about paralysis of analysis. Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
Really, everything contradicts each other. It's just like your head could spin.
So I think the best solution, right, is to have real conversations with people. Did this work for you? Yeah, it did, or this didn't, or here was my experience. And the more people are willing to share and to say, especially up in Buffalo, like we're talking about it. Yeah, the winters can be rough, and you maybe get the blues a little bit, but like, talking to other people about how changes they've made to nutrition, or again, health and wellness has helped them, especially when we have those brutal long sets of gloomy days.
Great.
Yeah, I know, but hey, the summer's here, so we're in a good spot. Just last question I have for you, I'll just say this. It's the last question I have for you right now. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. Best piece of advice I've ever been given. Wow. It's tough. I have so many conversations with so many people. And I feel like, I've taken bits and pieces, and I've applied them to my life, to be able to, kind of escape the rat race, or, get a little bit ahead, or do this or do that. I think presently the best advice I've been given is like, now I'm a father, I'm a dad, like that's kind of like my first priority. But that doesn't mean that like, I can't have all my other ducks in a row, because like, now there's, I got the weight of the world on my shoulders. So, I got to perform in other ways. But I think the best piece of advice is try to figure out ways to get passive income. So, and the term passive is such a loose term. Like owning real estate is not passive. That's like, it's a lot of work. That's working income in my eyes. But like, if you can create different avenues to make money, that way, as you age, like you can, kind of decide where you want to put your time. So I think that was a good piece of advice, because now, like, as I'm getting older with, different investments I've made, it's not just barbering. I'm able to like, step back, and if I want to take a week off work, I don't have to think about like, okay, I have to pay for a vacation and I'm missing, 4 days of income. Your mind changes. But I mean, this didn't happen until I got older. It's not like I'm going to be 25 years old and, cutting hair full time and have a real estate portfolio and have all these stocks. It's like, you got to build that up. So I think it'll happen organically if you want it to. But, I'm always available if anyone ever wants to, talk about.
I love it.
Things I've done. Not saying I have it figured out, but, I've
you're willing to share
what I figured out. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, look, dude, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time. Look, I hope to have you back someday.
Yeah, this was great. Hopefully, we'll see in 5 years if any of the stuff we said is going to be.
Yeah. Who knows? I'll see you in like a week when you cut my hair again.
Yeah.
All right, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to Angles. If this episode made you think, smile, or see something in a new way, follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a review and share it with friends. You can also follow us on social media. Angles is produced by Brett Tuttle. I'm John Richmond. See you next time.